This meeting is being recorded.
All right, welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. I'm excited to see what a great turnout this is, that people are thinking about the legacy that they want to leave and how to plan for that. And I mean, I know for us at Met How at Home, and I'm sure all of our local nonprofits feel this way, the Community Foundation is just so integral in the health of our nonprofits. I mean, all the years that I've been involved on boards and now on the staff of Met How at Home, we really have come to rely on the expertise coming from the Community Foundation for Education and then of course everything that you help us to do. Certainly it's amazing what has happened with Give Met House. So it's such a huge pleasure to get a chance to do this session with you this morning, Beth and Denise from the Community Foundation. And thank you so much to Natalie, who is just such a wonderful resource that we have here in this community. And I can speak personally to Natalie just being an incredible ally if you need help with estate law. And so thanks so much, you three. I'm gonna pass it over. I'm Tracy. I couldn't rename myself, so I look like Host Ma, but Tracy Sprower of the Community Foundation, and this is a Get Ready program. So with that, I'll hand it over.
Tracy, thanks for reminding me that I can rename myself. So I just did. Hi, everybody. I'm Beth Stipe. I'm with the Community Foundation of North Central Washington. And according to my screen, just to the right of me is my colleague, Denise Sorum, also with the Community Foundation. It's so great to see so many of you. It's been a long time. It's such a weird world that we live in now, but it's great that we can get together, at least with some technology, and talk about some cool things like estate planning, which I think is super fun. I've been around for about 20 years. I have a master's degree in nonprofit management, and I'm a certified advisor in philanthropy. And just, have had the privilege of working with a lot of donors, several of whom are on this Zoom call today. On estate planning issues and charitable giving. And so it's been super fun for me to get to do this work. This is going to be a very easygoing presentation. I don't have any slides or anything. We're just going to talk through some of the general estate gift vehicles that anyone can use in their building their legacy. And also we'll touch a little bit on how community foundations work in partnership with the local nonprofit community, as well as with our donors. Because I think one of the first things that I'll mention in just kind of what I've seen, and I don't know, maybe Natalie can confirm or dispel this idea, but most donors that we talk to don't have one charity that they support. They support lots of charities. And so when it comes time to setting up a legacy gift and an estate plan, oftentimes the Community Foundation becomes a really resourceful vehicle because they can do all of that giving in one place. And we'll talk through a little bit about some of the vehicles that we use internally at the Community Foundation later on. But I wanted to start with estate gifts, because that's really what we're here to talk about. So when someone is thinking about making an estate gift, and certainly they want to do something that is perpetual, that's going to leave a legacy in their community, oftentimes the easiest way to do that is first and foremost with a general bequest in a will or an estate plan. It's very easy. A donor can name an amount, they can name an asset, they can name a percentage of the estate, or they can make a remainder gift of the estate after all other bequests have been given out to family, friends, and anything else that they wanted to accomplish during their lifetime. Of course, also debts paid, that kind of thing. Oftentimes, using charitable donations in an estate come with eliminating the typically the Washington estate tax, because our federal estate tax is so high. I think, oh my gosh, what is it, Natalie? Is it like 20 some million dollars for a couple before
Yeah,
you even
12.
hit federal estate?
It's 12 million per person now, so 24 per couple on the federal level. Yeah.
Yep. So, but Washington State is decoupled with the federal system. And so it's a much lower threshold to reach that Washington estate. And I'll let Natalie tell you what that is, because I don't remember what it is right now.
2.193 million.
See, 1.3.
2.193 million, and you can double that through a little bit of fancy tax work in your will if you're a married couple, but that's the threshold that we're working with. Yep.
And so when you start thinking about an estate and all of the assets that a couple may have acquired over the course of their lifetime, it can add up. And so that's where some of this estate planning around charitable giving happens. Although what I would tell you is the vast majority of people that we work with don't have incredibly large estates like this. However, they still want to make a charitable gift in their community because that's just where their heart is. They love the places that they live, they love the people that are their neighbors, and they want to make sure that this place is cared for after they're gone. So once someone decides to make a charitable gift in their estate plan, then they have to decide who the beneficiary, the charitable beneficiary, is going to be. They can make an outright gift to any charity. They can create a fund at a community foundation to benefit one or more charities or causes that they love. And so I'll talk a little bit about that now because I think it fits with this because oftentimes when we see bequests come in or we're working with donors to create a bequest, they oftentimes already have an idea of what it is that they want to do. We have over 130 scholarship funds here at the Community Foundation. No two are alike. And those are set up by donors because they have a particular passion around educational attainment, and they want to support maybe their high school or their alma mater. So we have lots of Coug scholarships, not so many Husky scholarships. So I don't know what's up with the Husky people, but the Coug people are in it to win it. And we also have, certainly that donors who want to support students who are going into nursing. We have lots of folks who come in who have had experiences with really positive healthcare professionals, and they want to help support people in attaining that skill, and especially for a rural community like we live in, that's really important. We also have funds that we call designated beneficiary funds. And these funds are very much directed by the donors, and that can come in any way, shape, or form. And I'll give you an example of that. We had a couple, Margaret and Harold Weed, that she was a school teacher and he was a local orchardist. And Margaret was a force to be reckoned with in this community. She was probably on a dozen boards and just was very engaged. And when they passed away, they left their estate to the Community Foundation to benefit 13 different charities. And so every year in Margaret and Harold's name, we create grants to those organizations who now have sustainable funding that they can count on in perpetuity. And Margaret had it down to the third decimal point. So like, as an example, the Boy Scouts did get 6.135% of that annual distribution. And she made them all different. So because that was what that's just Margaret. So it can be that customized. It can also be something where it's a very simple process. Like we have a fund that Denise's family set up. And there are two beneficiaries. There's the Community Foundation's Community Grants Program, and then the general operations of the foundation. So that is a very simple example of a designated fund. We also have what we call field of interest funds. And field of interest funds don't designate a specific beneficiary organization because our donors believe that over the course of time that could change. New ones could come in that are doing great work in the community. Some might not be around anymore from circumstances of merging, or perhaps they are no longer in business. And so I'm going to give you an example, and I'm going to call out our friend Rufus, who's on this call today. So his family actually has a field of interest fund here at the foundation. It's the Woods Music and Art Fund. And this is a fund that on an annual basis gives out grants to charitable organizations that are doing work in the field of arts and music. So any given year, we can have anywhere between 15 to 30 grant organizations that are receiving funding in those fields. So that's a pretty cool way of doing things also. So those are kind of some of the examples that we would give you as to how an estate gift would work with community foundations. Oftentimes we are not the end beneficiary. Oftentimes those bequests come to us as restricted gifts, meaning that the donor has decided how those funds are going to be used. They can be general operating support with an organization, or they could be very specific in the sense that a donor wants to support the spay and neuter program of a local humane society. So it's our job to make sure not only the beneficiary is in good standing, so the humane society or similar organization, but also that they're using the funds in that particular restricted program that the donor has designated. So I'll take a breath there and see if there are any questions that anybody has with regards to kind of that easy estate giving vehicle.
And just remember that most of you are muted, so either unmute yourself or to ask your question, or put it in the chat, either whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay, well, I'll keep moving then.
Hey, hey, Beth.
Hi, Peggy.
Hi. So if I have a list of how I want some of those funds to go, and can, after I pass, then someone in my family can take that over and reassign, or how does that happen if, say, all my family lives out of town and, you know?
Sure. So, well, Peggy, so most of the time with designated funds, the donor doesn't provide a survivor advisory beneficiary. That's really only with our donor advised funds, which can happen with having successor advisors. I think we have one of our callers on here today is Earl Tilley. He just went to grab a chair. I see him now. He's back. He and Barbara have a donor advised fund here at the foundation, and they have a succession beneficiary where their children will have the ability to make grants out of their fund after they pass away. But that's a specific privilege that the donor has to grant. So we wouldn't be able to, like, if your kids come in and say, hey, mom has this fund that she set up and she wanted to give to XYZ organizations, and we really don't want to do that anymore. Whatever the donor has restricted, we will follow. So if you don't give them that specific ability to change your instructions, they won't have that. And I think I saw in the chat that someone was asking about what the fees are to manage charitable funds here at the foundation. And so that fee is a 1% annual fee on the balance of the fund, or the fund value on an annual basis. And that gets lowered as the funds reach certain tiered benchmarks, but on average it's 1%. It's been 1% for about 40 years now. And if you look across community foundations, I think across the country, you'll find that the fees at the Community Foundation of North Central Washington are actually some of the lowest in the country. And that's actually intentional. One of the things that the foundation's board has really focused in on is that we are a community foundation of the people that we serve. We're a rural community. And so we believe that there should be a very low threshold for entry into having a fund at the community foundation. We want everyone to know that they can be a philanthropist and leave a legacy in our community. So that minimum fund size, with the exception of scholarships, which is a bit higher, is $5,000. Scholarships are $10,000. And that's been that way. And I don't anticipate that changing moving forward. Did I miss any other questions in the chat?
I got a couple. Is there a form in particular that folks should use that you recommend, or even a certain form for the will?
So that's a great question. And I would also love to have Natalie answer that as well. So typically, the estate vehicle comes through an attorney. We don't have any ability to do that kind of work. That's a legal issue. We don't get involved in that. However, we have a lot of attorneys that we've worked with where the donor comes into the community foundation. We create our legally binding fund agreement, which has all of the language that, goes into play that we're going to, ensure donor intent. We're going to make sure that the grantees are still in good standing. We're going to have variance power, and I'll go into variance power here in a second, but that's a really important component of the community foundation. And so then we share that fund agreement with the attorney that the person is using, the donor is using. And then the attorney is able to reference the community foundation, our EIN number for benefit of the fund in question, the fund name in question, of which they'll attach a copy of that fund agreement onto the estate document. So that makes it easy. So like, as an example, Margaret, if she, had set up her 13 organizations and she joined a new board and wanted to add another one, she can just come back to us. We can update her fund agreement with a new draft and make sure that her attorney gets that to change that. But it doesn't change the beneficiary in the will, so you don't have to redo the will at that time. So that's oftentimes the way that we work with attorneys in particular. But Natalie, I'd love for you to share any insight around that.
Yeah, so there's no one general form. I think a little bit what you're hearing from Beth is there's no one general form to use for your charitable estate tax gifting. You will work, if you have a donor advised fund, I always send people directly to the community foundation to have those discussions, sign those agreements, and get things set up the right way, because there is flexibility involved in that as well. And other than that, it depends on, what you want, and you reference that in your will. And if you have, sometimes I have clients who say, I want to support all the charities and all the nonprofits in the Met How, but there are these three I care about especially. And so there's a general bequest to the community foundation for use in the Met How Valley Fund, no further strings attached. And then there are perhaps a few specific gifts to specific nonprofits that may or may not have additional gifts attached. So there's so much flexibility around charitable gifting, and it can be really fun to think that through and come up with a plan that works exactly right for you. And it can be as easy or as hard as you want. So if you want to really exercise a lot of control from the grave, as some clients say, over how your funds are used, you can do that. But at the same time, if you just want to give a chunk of your estate to the community foundation for use in the Met How Valley Fund or any fund, you can do that too. So it can be kind of as specific or as general as you want. And of course, you can change that over time. So, estate planning attorneys will always say, every 5 years, you should pull out your will and look at it. Every 7 to 10 years, you'll probably want to make some changes.
Thanks, Natalie. Yeah, we were chatting about that before everybody came online, that, there's definitely a progression that we see when we're working with donors. we just had a donor that came in the other day, and they're not very old, but they're getting ready to go on a large trip to another continent, and they wanted to make sure that their wishes were going to be fulfilled if something happened. But my guess is that we did this particular estate plan, and my guess is when they get back from their trip in a couple of years, they're going to go back to it and they're going to look at it again. But they wanted something in place in case something terrible happened while they were away, so that they could direct where their charitable assets were going to go. And thank you, Natalie, for mentioning the Methow Valley Fund. So that is a great way to, because we also had a question about limitations on geographic gifts in the chat there. And there are no limitations. So if you wanted to create part of your designated fund that, let's say, went to your favorite Methow Valley charities and plus your alma mater on the East Coast, or some organizations that you had growing up in another community that you loved from childhood, that's absolutely acceptable, so long as they're a 501c3 public charity. So we cover all of those kind of gift restrictions as well. Gift restrictions. So I want to go back to this issue of variance power. So in the governing documents of a community foundation, we have what we call variance power. And that allows the Board of Trustees the ability to change a material restriction that a donor sets, which donor restriction is like the highest level of authority. So we can't just arbitrarily say, oh gosh, we don't want to support the, let's see who's on the call here, Classroom in Bloom, even though the donor said that was their favorite charity and they wanted that supported. We can't just change that. But someday, if Classroom in Bloom say we don't have any public education anymore for whatever reason, and that's no longer a thing, and they go out of business, and we've got this fund that is supposed to support Classroom in Bloom, we need to change that, because we can't make that grant any longer for whatever reason that is. So that variance power creates a responsibility for the Board of Trustees to find a similar organization that would meet the intention of the donor. So we would look for another organization that ideally worked with kids and had some connection to farming or the environment in that particular community. So that would be kind of the first realm. And I'll give you an example of how this has played out for real at the Community Foundation. So we had a fund that was established by Bequest, and it was a scholarship fund. And the donor wanted a woman graduating from Wenatchee Valley College, going on to a four-year university to major in English. Very specific. And we had that fund for 7 years without one single applicant. So at that point in time, we knew that the ultimate intention of this donor was that she wanted to support someone who's going to go off to be a teacher. So we just broadened the criteria a little bit. And the next year, so we said, graduating from Wenatchee Valley College, going to a four-year university, and going to be majoring in English or getting a teaching certificate. And the next year we had 5 applicants. So we were able to give away that scholarship. So that's why we have that variance power. Community foundations have been around in this country since 1914, I believe it is. Yeah, 1914. Started in Cleveland, Ohio. And some of the first funds that they had in Cleveland were what we would call field of interest funds. There was one fund in particular that was established by a woman to keep the gas street lamps lit. Well, in 2023, there's not a lot of gas street lamps. So the Community Foundation in Cleveland had to amend that donor restriction and to make that available for street safety and lighting. So now they can use that for all sorts of things that ultimately gets to what that donor was looking for, but it evolves with the times. So I think that's one of the beautiful things about variance power. I know people get kind of freaked out about it, like, oh, you're going to change what I do. Well, we're really not in the business of doing that just for fun, but it's a great tool for us to be able to say, your gift, regardless of how long ago it was, because we're talking perpetuity forever. We're gonna remember you forever. Is gonna follow with the times. We're gonna make sure that you get your dollars are going to be impactful in your community as long as the world is going on. So that's a pretty cool thing about that. Okay, I'm going to move to the next thing because we're blowing through time here. So general bequests, super easy. Go meet your friend Natalie. She'll help you out. Charitable remainder trusts. I'm going to talk a little bit about these. These can be done as a testamentary trust, so you can establish one in your estate plan, or you can do it during your lifetime. So some of the highlights around charitable remainder trusts are that they provide income back to a beneficiary or beneficiaries for a term of years, or for the lifetime of the beneficiary or beneficiaries. And there's a bunch of calculations and stuff. And it's, we have to run some scenarios, because in order for the trust to remain viable, there has to be at least a 10% remainder that's going to go to charity at the end of the term or life of the beneficiary. So it can be a little tricky depending upon the ages of the beneficiary or beneficiaries that you're choosing. The trust has to pay back a minimum of 5%. Anything above 5% is negotiated with the, it's negotiated, or it can be put into place, because ultimately the donor could be the trustee or a charitable organization or a professional trustee or a bank. There's lots of ways that you can set that up. Must be established by a lawyer. It is a separate legal entity. So it's going to have its own EIN number. And then once you decide on that percentage that's going to come back, that percentage is going to be valued at the end of the every calendar year. And then the amount that goes back to the beneficiaries is determined that year and is paid out the following year. Typically, these are vehicles that are used for highly appreciated assets. We see this happening quite a bit for folks who have either really highly appreciated stock or investment properties, so income producing properties. So this is a really great tool for folks who maybe bought an apartment building in Seattle back in the 50s and didn't pay a ton of money for it, depreciated it over decades. And now they want to sell it because they're tired of getting phone calls in the middle of the night that the toilets are clogged up or the water heater's leaking or all of those fun things that go along with being a landlord, but they still need the income. So this is a great way to transfer that asset. You deed it into the trust once it's created. You get a tax deduction for that gift. And there's a calculation that goes along with that. And any of the capital gains that you receive from the difference of what you bought it for and what you sold it, or what you donated it for in the trust, because there's got to be an appraisal that's done prior to that distribution into the trust. Those capital gains are spread out over the lifetime of the payments to the beneficiary or beneficiaries. So it's a really great way to, instead of taking a huge capital gains bill at the sale of an asset, you spread that out over the course of time. And sometimes that can be really beneficial because you're also offsetting it with a charitable deduction at the same time. And you no longer have to answer the phone when it rings if you've got, the water heater's leaking and your tenants are unhappy. So there's some really good ways to do that. And again, you can name your children, you can name grandchildren, although it gets a little trickier the younger they get. So in that situation, we would want to probably go on the lower end of the percentage. So at that 5% payout rate, and then probably a term of years. And I believe, Natalie, you can maybe correct me on this, but you can also defer it So like if you did want to leave, or if you did want to do something like this and have your grandchildren be the beneficiaries, you can defer the payout so that they get older, so that it helps the trust to not fail, essentially, because you don't want to fail charitable remainder trust, because then it causes all sorts of tax problems. So you want to be very, very careful about what kind of beneficiaries and percentages that you set these charitable remainder trusts up at.
Yep, that's right, Beth.
Cool. This is also really beneficial because you can donate your property in, and there's also a trigger component or a flip component where you can donate the asset in and you don't receive the payments until the asset is sold. So sometimes it takes a little bit of time. And so once the trust is established and it has assets in it, then the beneficiaries by contract have to be paid. But with a flip provision, you can wait until that asset is sold, and then there are additional payments that come back to you to make those payments up. And so it's a really, really flexible, great tool, and a great way to use those really highly appreciated assets that you want to transition and do something good for charity. Because at the end of the life of the beneficiary or beneficiaries, you have named charity or charities as the remainder beneficiary of this trust. So we have an example. This is a woman who was very involved with our local cancer nonprofit here in Wenatchee, Cancer Care. And she had 2 adult sons who had some disabilities, and she didn't want to have them receive an outright bequest because she was afraid they wouldn't have the capability to care for that wealth immediately. But she also didn't want to do a special needs trust, which would have a trustee involved in saying yes or no to the different expenses that that her sons might want. So she wanted to make sure that at the end of her children's life, that there was still money left from her estate, even though she's been gone for decades now, that she's still going to have that charitable bequest at the end of her kids' life, after she takes care of them. So now on a monthly basis, those kids get a check from the community foundation. And then when her sons pass away, anything that remains in that trust, of which we've been investing all of these years, will go into a fund that will benefit her favorite cancer charity that she spent years volunteering for. So it's a really great tool for those kinds of situations as well. Any questions on that?
For some reason, I cannot see the full chat, so I'm just assuming that you can because you've been responding. So.
I don't
So
see
I have
anything new.
Okay, good. I don't know.
Carolyn, you're
know.
muted, but I see your hand up.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
So that what you just explained was really interesting in light of children who maybe do not have a disability, but the idea of having a payout that is over time sounds great. I mean, I think about my grandmother put a stipulation of I had to be 25. No, the money could pay for education, and then whatever was left would not be distributed till I was 25. So, thank you for kind of saying, oh yeah, there really are as many variables as there are situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the thing about estate planning, is you're never going to find 2 that are alike. Everybody has different circumstances, different interests. And so, that's one of the great things about a community foundation, is that we can customize those giving vehicles to whatever the donor's needs are. And same with the estate planning. Natalie has a ton of tools at her disposal to make sure that all of these different situations can be accounted for. So I think the sky is the limit. And so when you're thinking about your legacy and your estate, I don't think you need to limit yourself to what kind of things you want to accomplish, because we can work with you to work through all sorts of different scenarios that hopefully will meet all the needs that you have. So instead of the sports car right away, your great grandson can, maybe save a little every month. So there's a little bit of a teaching tool there, perhaps, which for some donors, that is super important to them, that they're not only leaving a legacy, but they're leaving some of their values with their children or grandchildren as well. So, so that's something else to consider. Anyone else with question on that one? And I'll move on to another vehicle. Okay, so another tool in the toolbox is life insurance. So oftentimes we find, especially with older donors, that they have life insurance policies that they've had for decades that are paid up because they had them when their families were young, in case something were to happen to them. And these are great gifting tools to charity that really make no impact on the income or the lifestyle of the donor in today's world. So you have a couple of different ways to do that. One, of course, is with a paid policy that's paid in full. You can actually gift the policy and make the charity the owner of the policy. In those situations, there might often be a surrender opportunity. While it's not the face value of the death benefit of the life insurance policy, it can absolutely make an impact depending upon the value of that surrender to the donor's charitable interest in their lifetime. So that's a good one. Also, it's very easy to name a charity as the beneficiary of a life insurance policy, so that upon that death benefit, the charity receives those funds. And so I'll give you an example of, we just actually had a donor who had a policy that was paid in full. His children are grown. He sees no need for life insurance at this point in his life. So what he did was he had to have an appraisal done, and we were able to connect him with someone who can appraise a life insurance policy and provide the documentation that he needed in order to take a tax deduction for the gift of this life insurance policy. He named the Community Foundation as the owner of that policy. It was transferred into the Community Foundation's name, and we, based on the request of the donor, surrendered it and got a check back from the insurance company, of which we were able to place those proceeds into the donor's scholarship fund. So now the donor has gotten a tax deduction for something he's not using. He was able to increase the amount of scholarships that he's giving on an annual basis, which he loves, let me tell you. And so it was a win-win for everybody in that situation. So that is something also that people don't often think about, because they've forgotten that this is even something that, nobody sends me a bill for it. And I really don't need it anymore, but it's an asset that you can use to really further your charitable interests. So that's pretty cool as well. Any questions on that? Okay, so I'm going to go to the most convoluted, confusing tool that is in the toolbox these days, which is a IRA QCD. So how many of you have heard of the QCD, or Qualified Charitable Distribution, from your IRA, individual retirement account, right? And while it seems simple, it seems to be hard. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that exactly is. So at age 70 and a half, thanks to our friends in Congress, if you have an IRA, you can make a distribution out of your IRA up to $100,000 per year to any qualified charity, and you won't be saddled with the income from that gift, from taking out taking money out of your IRA, because typically if you take money out of your IRA, it goes into your annual income calculation, of which you pay ordinary income tax. So people who have worked for many years and have saved in their IRAs, these tax deferred vehicles, they sometimes have a sizable amount that they've saved up. Sometimes that is one of only many of their different income sources in retirement, and perhaps it's not their main source, and it's an ancillary source that they really don't have the need to utilize to maintain their lifestyle. However, they like to do charitable giving. So it's a way for them to not do charitable giving out of their income stream, but to take something out of an asset that maybe they aren't using or don't intend to use for many, many years. Now, when that person reaches age 72, the government is going to tell you, good for you. We're proud that you saved all this money. Now we're going to make you take it, whether you want to or not. So oftentimes, or sometimes I should say, that can create some headaches for the donors, in the sense that it boosts their income into a higher tax bracket, which has all sorts of implications for them with Medicare and other things that they have set forth in their fixed income stages of life. So in order for them to do their charitable giving that they want to do, because they want to support these organizations that they love, oftentimes they're volunteering with, they can take the qualified charitable distribution in lieu of the RMD, the required minimum distribution, and they can transfer that to charity, and that required minimum distribution will be fulfilled. So you're going to make the government happy. They're going to say, okay, you did your part of taking money out of your IRA like we told you to, but it's not going to go into your ordinary income taxation bucket. So you can do that good work without pushing yourself into an income tax bracket that's perhaps higher than what you're interested in paying. So the tricky part here is, one of the things that you cannot do with a QCD is you cannot make a distribution into a donor advised fund. That is not acceptable. You can send it to the community foundation, to your scholarship fund, to your designated fund, to field of interest fund, to your geographic field of interest fund, like the Methow Valley Fund. You just can't do it into a DAF. And you can also do it to any qualified charity. So there are lots of great charities that are on this call today. You could divvy it out to 10 or 12 of them if you wanted to do that, in any amount that you see fit. You just need to let the trustee know the check has to go to the charity. It cannot come to you and then go to the charity. So that is very important. If the check comes to you and then you turn around and hand it off to the charity, you're going to get that ordinary income, even though you're giving it to charity, but you will get a charitable deduction on the back end. And I'm not smart enough to know, and I think it depends on each individual person's circumstances, which way is the best way to go, whether you should take the RMD and then do a charitable contribution to get a tax deduction for your charitable contribution, or to do the QCD. That's really something that you need to work out with your professional advisor and your accountant. But that's a little bit about the QCDs, and we have lots of folks who are using those these days. We try to implement a lot of tools to help make it easy for them. So as an example, if you don't have a fund at the community foundation, but let's say you want to support a bunch of nonprofits in the Methow, what we've done is, if you send us a QCD and say, hey, I'm going to use this on Give Methow, we'll issue you a giving card in which your entire QCD will be on that giving card. And you can go on to the Give Methow website and you can shop your little heart out and support those organizations using that giving card. Super easy. One checkout, we give you a PIN, works great. And then we send a letter to you that says, we've received your QCD, it didn't go into a DAF, and you can share that back with your your professional advisor when they're doing your tax returns. Question, can you take a partial QCD and also take some income? Absolutely. This is not an all or nothing tool. You can take, if you have $100,000 in required minimum distribution, and let's say you really do need some of that money, you can take 50, 75, and then use 25 as a QCD. And then only what the portion that you take as income will be taxed as income. The rest, even though it was required, will be used as a QCD. So any percentage, any amount within those parameters, it's up to you, and you're directing your trustee to do that. So pretty easy stuff.
I have another question that came in. Is anyone having issues on taking a charitable tax deduction with the standard deduction so high, or do we assume the donors are gifting large amounts?
I would say that there are a lot of people who are giving and not getting a tax deduction, but they're giving because they care.
Mm-hmm.
But what we do see, in particular with our donor advised funds, it's called bundling. At least that's the term that the accountants are using, is that they will recommend to their donors who do want to do maybe some larger charitable gifts that they bundle them into 1 year, use appreciated assets, take that tax deduction in 1 year, and then use those funds that are in their donor advised funds to do their charitable giving over the course of the next 2, 4, 5 years. So like, as an example, you know, the standard deduction is $26,000 for a couple. So let's say that you give $10,000 a year for charity. You bought Amazon back when it was a startup at $6 a share. It's now worth probably $2,500. It was $3,000, but we're going to give the downturn a little bit of a catch there. You still have a huge capital gains there. So you could take $100,000 worth of Amazon stock, gift it to the community foundation for your donor advised fund. We're going to give you a fair market value deduction for that, which is going to be well over that standard deduction. And you're going to be able to take those resources and use them for the next 10 years. Because if $100,000 or $10,000 is what you give in your charitable giving budget every year, you can take that money and deploy it out as you see fit over the next many years. So it's a great way to do that tool. And we actually do have a family that one of our former board chairs, his wife Mimi, who just unfortunately recently passed away, but she was back in the 80s in her investment club with her lady friends. And they did buy Amazon at some investment conference that they went to. And so she would always give Chris a hard time because he kept donating her Amazon stock. And she's like, stop getting my Amazon stock. And he's like, Mimi, you can't sell it. So it was a really good way for them to do all of their charitable giving and get rid of some of that Amazon that was going to cost them a fortune to sell. So accomplished 2 goals.
I have another question about direct asset donation, but maybe you're going to talk about that as one of the vehicles.
Direct, well, that can be done in any of the vehicles. So tell me a little bit more about your question.
Do you only manage ongoing fund style bequests, or how about direct asset donation? Should that go straight to the desired nonprofit?
I don't think I understand the question. So like a direct asset.
Let's say you sell your car or something. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Well, if the person who asked that question would maybe want to share that with us. I'll give you an example of a conversation that I had just recently with Methow Housing Trust. They said, hey, you know, we've got folks here in the Methow who have a second home. And so we've, talked to them about, maybe that's something that they want to consider making a bequest directly to Methow Housing Trust if they're no longer using their second home after they're gone, and they maybe don't have any children, or they don't want to leave it to their children, or the children don't want it. That oftentimes is the case. Maybe all the kids live on the East Coast and there's no way they're gonna get to the Methow Valley enough to take advantage of having the family cabin. And so they decide that that's a great gift to give back to the community. So in those situations, no, the community foundation would not be the right fit for that, because what we're going to do is we're going to sell it, and we're going to take those resources and we're going to deploy those for the use of whatever charity or charities or purpose that the donor has decided that makes sense. For Methow Housing Trust, that might be a great direct gift because they might be able to deploy that back out into the community as one of the affordable houses. So maybe that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. That
Yeah.
sounds.
So that does bring me to one of our other tools that's in the toolbox, and that's a life estate. So a life estate, again, this is going to be one of those tools that works really well for high net worth individuals that really are going to have some estate tax issues. And so let's say that they do have a second home in the Methow Valley, and they need to do some estate planning and their attorney recommends that they start gifting now so that they can get some assets out of their estate prior to their death, so they don't reach that Washington state estate tax level. And so they look at the second home and say, oh, well, that would be a good gift to give away. And maybe they have, a pretty good income, and so they're looking for a charitable deduction. So they can do a life estate, which is a gift of a piece of property that they're enjoying during their lifetime. They continue to enjoy the exclusive use of the property. They also get to enjoy paying the taxes and the upkeep. So got to keep that driveway plowed in the winter. And then at the end of their lifetime, then the charity will take possession of that asset. However, because they've already gifted it during their lifetime, they get a charitable deduction for that, and that asset comes out of their estate. So there are some really good tools around that for some estate planning work. Couple more that I don't tend to talk a lot about, because one is charitable gift annuities. They act similar to a commercial annuity where you give the charity money and the charity provides you with an income for life. We don't do them. I don't know any small nonprofit that does charitable gifts annuities because it's a giant pain in the butt. And I wouldn't recommend it to anyone unless you're a giant organization. So like places like the Nature Conservancy, big national organizations will do charitable gift annuities, but you'd be hard pressed to find. All universities do them, but you'd be hard pressed to find a local organization, and you don't get to pick a beneficiary. So if you do a charitable gift annuity with the Nature Conservancy is getting that gift at the end. So that's charitable gift annuities in a nutshell. The rates are established by a council based on age and that type of thing. Charitable lead trusts, again, I've never done one. I've never seen one. Typically, those are, again, really high net worth asset-based trusts. The tricky thing about the different thing about a charitable lead trust versus a remainder trust is that the income that is in the trust comes out to the charity instead of the donor or the donor's designated beneficiaries. And then at the end of the trust time frame or beneficiary or time frame, it's always a time frame, I'm pretty sure, then that asset that was put into the trust that was creating the income goes back to the donor or the donor's designee. So oftentimes this is a generational transfer that happens. So like, as an example, there's a big family ranch. It's going to get value. They know that there's this big pressure for development around the ranch. The family wants to keep it into ranching, wants to get it to the kids or the grandkids. And so but they want to do that in a way that's beneficial and not going to like overwhelm them with cost. So they'll put this ranch into a lead trust. They'll be the income from the cattle that are on the ranch go to a charity or charity of their choice during this time frame, and then at the end of that time frame, then the ranch transfers to the beneficiaries or back to the donor at a lower cost basis. So because they're gambling on the fact that the ranch is going to be worth millions more 20 years from now, and so they can keep that cost basis low, so when they want to transfer that or get it back for planning purposes, that's how they use it. But that's something really complicated that, again, it has to be set up with an attorney, and they can establish the trustee. And typically the charity is really just the beneficiary of those funds. So there's not a lot of effort or energy that comes your way. You might just be the lucky beneficiary of a check one day, which, those are exciting times. And I would say that, also with a lot of general bequests, there are people in your community who are putting your organization in their will and estate plan, and they're not going to tell you. We love it when people tell us, it's great, but we understand that there are reasons that they don't want to do that. And so sometimes you get a letter from Natalie with her letterhead, Natalie Cooler Law Firm, and you open it up and there's a letter in there that says, hey, you're the beneficiary of an estate. And those are pretty good days when you are running a charity. Surprise.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the tools that I have outlined in the toolbox, and we've now blown away an hour of your day. So I'd love to open it up if there are any additional questions or something that you want to talk about. We could talk together about that.
Beth, this is Susan.
Hi, Susan.
That was my question earlier that I passed through Tracy that was not understandable. So I was wondering, like, if you have some appreciated stocks,
yeah,
and you'd like to gift them to a nonprofit, but it's like it might be a burden to them to have to sell them and figure all that. Do you guys do? That's what I meant by the pass through. Like, do you guys, you would do that and just
totally
take care of all the transactions and pass it along?
Do it all the time.
Okay, great. That was my question.
And you're right, Susan. There are a lot of, in particular, small volunteer organizations that don't have brokerage accounts set up, nor it's, especially with a volunteer treasurer, it's really hard to track those things. So yeah, we're set up to do that. We do it all the time for organizations and donors. And the only thing that we ask is that please let us know, because the brokerage houses won't tell us who the donors are. So we have people who send us stock, especially around Christmas time, or year end, we get a lot of stock gifts. And there's a form on our website that says who you are, what stock you're sending us, and where you want it to go. And people forget to do that, and then we have no idea. And then all of a sudden, it comes tax time and they're like, hey, I never got that tax receipt for those 50 shares of Pepsi I sent you. And it's like, okay, well, Dr. Stoller, you didn't tell us that you sent us the Pepsi, so we didn't know. So
all right, great. Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, just make sure if you're trying to ask a question out there and no one's responding, check your mute and make sure it's not on.
I think I'd just like to chime in and say we've gotten into some very fancy charitable estate planning tools, but for me, one of the big takeaways and one of the really wonderful things is that you don't actually have to be really wealthy or need really advanced tax planning or estate planning to really make a difference, for generations to come, by very easy gifting options to the community foundation or directly to charities. But the nice thing, if you go through the community foundation, is, you get a longer term horizon. Gifts that go to charitable organizations directly, they, usually it's the whim of the board at the time what those funds get used for. So there's a little bit of a difference in the impact that you can make depending on gifting directly versus gifting to the community foundation. And the great thing about the Community Foundation is that the limits, the necessary minimum donations are so low. I feel like every time we do one of these presentations, I say, remind me what is the minimum, because it's so low. I can't believe it. Every time I'm shocked and new. So, don't be intimidated by these fancy tools, because you can really make a difference with a fairly small amount, whether that's now or whether that's through your testamentary bequests at the end of your lifetime. So thank you, Community Foundation, for everything that you do. Yeah.
I have a question. So if I take my RMD or part of that and put it in the community, put it in the Community Foundation, can I write checks to charitable entities that I usually donate money to as their request comes in? Can I write a check and use that fund that way?
No. That is, again, that's that one thing that you cannot do, which is a donor advised fund. But
Okay.
Antonia, if you all, so, every year we do the Give Methow campaign. And I think every single charity in the Methow Valley, with the exception of if you have some charities that you like to support that are outside of the Valley, which a lot of donors will maybe have some of those, we have a way to work with you on that. So if you want to give us a call, we can help you talk through kind of, if you give us an idea of what you're looking at, how we can make that work for you. So we would do a giving card for you for anything that you wanted to do in the Methow Valley. So you can, like I said, go on to the Give Methow campaign and give to your favorite organizations from the Methow. And then let's say that you have 4 or 5 or whatever that are outside of the organization. What we do in those situations is we have you send us an email or a letter that says, I'm going to send you a qualified charitable distribution from my IRA. I would like a giving card for X amount of dollars out of that money. And I would like the remainder to go in these amounts to these organizations. And then we cut direct checks. We put it into what we call our pass-through fund, so that it never goes into a donor advised fund, so that you can be in compliance with the law. But what we can't do is we can't hold those funds and let you decide later. You have to make that decision before you send us the money.
Okay, thank
But if
you.
you want to talk to us more about that, you can give us a call. And we have
Okay.
lots of donors that do that, Antonia. So
Thank you.
Carolyn.
Well, a couple of things. One, I was under the impression that when you do the QCD, that you get checks that you can just write to an approved 501c3. Is that correct?
That is correct, through your trustee.
Yeah, yes, not
Yep.
through you. Okay.
Yep, correct.
And the other question is if in writing our will, we've already listed individual recipients that are administered by the Community Foundation, would it be better to direct that money to you and have it go through that way?
Well, so if you have listed organizations in your will, those funds will go to them. They won't go to the Community Foundation. Let's say, like as an example, that we have some endowed funds here at the foundation that benefit charities. We have 70 different organizational funds, agency funds here at the foundation. But in order for you to get the money that you're going to gift into those funds, they would have to come through the Community Foundation. So does that make sense?
It does. What I'm trying to figure out is, would it make sense, just for example, if you said a percentage went to a certain organization, could you give all those directives to you? Would it be beneficial?
Well, it depends. It depends on what you want to accomplish. So Natalie made a mention of this a little bit ago, in that when the funds come to the Community Foundation, they're here forever. And so, Carolyn, we're going to make grants to the organizations that you tell us to forever in your name. if you list a nonprofit in your will directly, as Natalie said, that is up to that particular nonprofit organization's board of trustees at the time of the gift as to what they decide to do with those funds. So it's kind of a one and done versus our
Ongoing.
job is to make sure those gifts go out annually over the course of time.
Okay,
So-
that's,
No
Good
right
answer.
or wrong answer, just
No,
what your interest is.
yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, one more
Yes.
question. So this is for Natalie. Can you just note in your will, instead of all this money being separated, can you just say this percentage goes to the community foundation, or do you have to go to a lawyer?
Yeah, no, you can absolutely note that in your will. You can say this money goes to the community foundation. I have a lot of clients who say this percentage of my estate
Yeah,
goes to the Methow Valley Fund held by the community foundation, and that's it. Yeah. so
Great.
it can be as simple as that.
yeah,
Depends entirely on how much control you want to exert. And sometimes folks really would like to have a lot of control, and sometimes they don't. They just want to be sure they know they're giving it to an organization that has proved it does a great job of administering funds over time.
yeah. My mother always said you can't rule from the grave, but
Well, you can, but
you're making it sound like you can.
I would say Margaret Weed would disagree with you.
Exactly. I think you proved that point.
Yes.
There's one more question in the chat that I want to be sure we get. And thanks for the folks who are staying on a little bit. Thank you, Beth and Natalie and Denise for staying on, because I think it's important to get these questions. Not sure who would be best to answer this, but if we have more questions regarding ways to set a fund up, is it best to see someone like Natalie, a financial or advisor, or say Beth at the community fund first? Sort of chicken and egg, basically. Do you have a recommendation on where first to begin?
I say go to Beth. First place, I think your first stop is you want to talk to Beth and you want to see, what are the options that you have through the community foundation. And then after that, you're probably going to want to go to a financial advisor, depending on what it is that you're talking about, and then a lawyer to draw it all up for you.
Yeah.
I got a quick
Thank you.
question.
That was my question. Thank you. That was great.
I got a quick question.
Hi, Jill.
Hi. Hey, so if you add that to your will and just say, I want to, put whatever, 10% into Community Foundation or Central Washington, do you have to have that notarized, or can you just, both of you write that and sign that on an existing will?
Yeah, so great question. So that goes to, what do you need to have a will be effective? I always like to notarize wills. You have to have two witnesses, and I like to notarize wills as well. And that goes for any changes to your wills too.
Okay.
However, a notary is not strictly necessary. You can just have two witnesses as long as they sign an affidavit confirming under penalties of perjury that they watched you sign your changes to your will. Now, it's always tricky. Lawyers get very nervous when clients make changes to their own wills because there are pitfalls. Because, for example, if you cross something out and then you write something else in and you don't follow the right formalities, what you cross out is crossed out, but what you write in doesn't become valid. So you end up losing both. So just be careful what you do. But yes, you can sign a will or make changes to a will without a notary and without an attorney, as long as you follow the proper witnessing procedures.
Is a notary probably the best, easiest way versus doing that? Having two witnesses seems a little dodgy.
You need two witnesses, even with a notary. The notary can be one of the witnesses, but you need two witnesses. Two witnesses really are more important than a notary. I like a notary because it eliminates any question in case there's a dispute over whether the people who, say they were witnesses were in fact witnesses, and whether the person signing the will or amendment was in fact competent to do so. So I always like to use a notary, but it's not strictly legally necessary.
Yep.
The two witnesses are.
Shouldn't the witnesses be non-family members?
They can be family members as long as they don't take anything under the will. And even if they do take something under the will, they can still be witnesses, but it creates a tricky presumption that they are self-interested, and then it can lead to challenges. So again, legally required, no, they can be family members even if they themselves still get something under the will. But I always recommend people who are not related, are not getting anything under the will, disinterested witnesses. They don't get to read your will. They just witness your signature. So you don't have to worry that these witnesses are going to know the details of your estate planning. They won't. They are there strictly to say, I was here, I saw him or her sign, and they were competent to do so and told me that this is what they wanted to do. And there was nobody else there influencing them at the time.
Is there some kind of form or is there some kind of verbiage that is?
There is
Online?
verbiage that attorneys use. I don't, I'm sure you can find something online.
Okay.
I will tell you that oftentimes when I have clients using online estate planning tools, I end up doing a lot of work on the back end to clean things up. So you may find it actually cheaper to go to an attorney to prepare your documents in the first instance than going to an attorney to unwind what you've done or clean things up.
Okay. Really good.
Yeah.
A good estate plan, even if it's simple, is money well spent.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you think, I'm going to leave everything to charity, go to an attorney. They're actually quite affordable, in particular around these simple wills and estates. And it's money well spent. You're going to be protected. Your wishes are going to be fulfilled. And I just can't say enough about the professional advisors that we have in this region that really have an interest in making sure that their clients are taken care of.
That being said, one more thing. Sorry, I know we could just go for a while on, because these are big subjects, but is there a financial advisor that you all work with a lot?
So we don't make specific recommendations to what professional advisors to use because it's very personal. I mean, professional advisors are people, they have personalities. And so donors and clients also have personalities. And we want to make sure that you find the match with the person who you fit with. But that being said, the Community Foundation does have a list of professional advisors in the region who have stepped up, and it's an opt-in thing that they say, hey, I want to work with clients who have charitable interests. And so you can find those contacts on our website at cfncw.org. And then what we encourage people to do is call a few of them and get to know them, interview them, and find the one that's the best fit for you.
That's great. Here comes Cordell Nair and Company Financial Group is definitely available. Okay, thanks, Karen. It's always good to have somewhere to start because we're just in Met How. I mean, I am just like, what? Financial advisor. So anyway, thank you so much, everybody. And thanks to Natalie, Beth, and Denise for your time this morning. It's January is a good time to be thinking about this stuff and just use that fresh energy to like dig into some of these questions. So.
Well, thank you so much for putting this on, Tracy, and thank you all for showing up today. It was so great.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Travel
Thank
safely
you.
out there.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hi, Earl.